On September 11, 2025, Bethan Hardison, activist, asked Yara Shahidi, activist, in a Forbes interview on how she felt about her world right now. Yara answered honestly by saying she is terrified and would like a plan to fix it. I empathize in that no one should live in fear. In my opinion, this sounds like a plea for help. I want to help, but how? When Yara Shahidi was younger, she did an equality speech on October 19, 2018 at the Gleason Respect Awards. I argue the speech is the hypothesis to fix her world and to reduce her fear. In April 2024, I published my book on Amazon based on this hypothesis, showing that prevention will lead to equity and that equity will lead to equality. This hypothesis will fix the political, economic, and social problems in her world and our world. This nonprofit, non-edited channel is a letter to Yara Shahidi in teaching Yara's hypothesis to the public in order to better our world. In the end, Yara Shahidi will get the Nobel Peace Prize for her hypothesis. Dear Yara Shahidi, Chapter 14, Information Equality. Next on the list for achieving Dr. King's dream is information equality. The racism experts show that racism is built upon who is in the in-group and who is in the out-group. Science experiments exhibit that people show more compassion for people that they think are in their in-group. In one experiment, people were in an MRI machine and shown a hand getting poked by a large needle. With one word label of several religious groups, they showed more empathy for their religious group than the others. Even atheists showed more empathy toward their group than others. Science experiments show humans have empathy toward their own religious group because human brains are wired for social interactions with other people. The human brain is dependent on other humans for survival through information exchanges like jokes, ideas, or gossip. Humans judge each other constantly on intent such as friendship or threat. With this in mind, humans can respond to the situation better or person with their compassion or fear. If the person recognizes an in-group member or their own religious group, trust is then established, and then simple informational exchanges can be done without the fear. If the person is seen from the out-group or another religious group, then this person's stress hormone, cortisol, kicks in, and it initiates the person's flight, fight, or freeze protocols for survival. Science experiments also show that babies are born with an instinct of who is kind and who is not. In retrospect, human brains are born to know who is in the in-group and who is in the out-group, again for survival. I argue that out-group members can be incorporated into the in-group through empathy. For example, when humans watch movies or read books, they feel what that character is feeling or going through by recognizing the emotion from their own experiences. Even though humans recognize that the characters in books or movies or make-believe, the person following along in the story mimics or mirrors the same trauma or joy that the characters of the story are going through. This is why movies and books have been so popular throughout history and are universal across all cultures. As noted before, all humans have the same limbic system or emotional center of the brain. This means that when a person is in pain, say in the movies, then that person is experiencing their pain as well. The pain matrix in the brain is at the heart of how humans connect with each other. This is the basis for empathy. Now, the way empathy works is when a person consoles a friend during a time of grief or major disappointment. For example, if your friend was dumped by a romantic partner and you listen to your friend vent their pain by listening to the distraught friend's situation and by exchanging ideas and not being the victim of such a breakup again, then the cortisol or stress hormone is diminished from your friend and they will feel a little bit better. Now, a social bond is formed and strengthened within the friend because the friend gets relief from the pain and they are shown that another person cares what happens to them by taking the time, say out of your busy day just to listen. Your social connection sprouts when you want to help your friend in any way you can. You can reflect on what they are going through because You have experienced it before or have an understanding of the emotions that they are going through. For all humans have the same emotional center in our brain. This is empathy. Now, if schools use preventative means, such as this exercise and lessons in school for children from 2 years old to graduation, then the out group would be the in group in adulthood. I'll explain more later. This is just one answer to Dr. King's dream. Now, the one thing that can reduce empathy significantly is propaganda. Propaganda began in the 19th century, in which it began to be used as a term denoting ideas or information that are of questionable accuracy as a means of advancing a cause. History has shown that propaganda has played a significant role in genocides in the 20th and 21st centuries, like Hitler and the Nazi campaign that started World War II. What propaganda does so well is that it dials down empathy and where people stop caring about others. For example, in the former Yugoslavia, the people who went on to torture and kill their neighbors were bombarded with propaganda by state-controlled broadcasters demonizing Bosnian Muslims with distorted news stories like they were feeding Serbian children to the lions in the zoo. With this dehumanization, a genocide was conducted, and the U.S. and its allies were forced to stop it in the 90s. Propaganda of today in the United States is a cult called Q Anon. Q Anon's core belief is that they believe liberal elites are kidnapping children and draining them of their essence. Q Anon did not start this idea about the kidnapping of children. This idea goes back to the Middle Ages, where this propaganda was about the Jews. The propaganda says that powerful Jews were meeting in secret late night. The propaganda says that powerful Jews were meeting in secret late at night to ritualistically abuse children and drink their blood. Also, the Jews were using these secret occult rituals to rule the world. In the early 1900s, a book was made and published in Russia called The Protocols of the Elders of Zion. This book was a forgery and claimed to be the minutes of a secret meeting at which Jews in Switzerland were planning on how they were going to take over the world by ritualistically abusing children and drinking their blood. This book was just a retelling of Middle-Age propaganda of the Jews. This book worked as a pretext for persecution, and it has been used to promote all kinds of other anti-Semitic beliefs and actions to this day. In the 1970s, white supremacists in the United States were circulating the protocols of the Elders of Zion book and its propaganda about the Jews. The white supremacists claimed that Jews controlled world governments and were killing children for their blood. What QAnon has done is that it took the Protocols of the Elders of Zion book and its propaganda for white supremacists and switched out the Jews for liberal elites. QAnon's propaganda says that a cabal of powerful evildoers of liberal elites are meeting in secret late at night in order to take over the United States and the world by ritualistically abusing children and to use a substance produced from children's bodies called adrenochrome to gain eternal life. The funny thing about this is that you can buy adrenochrome at a drugstore without sacrificing children. Again, QAnon is just retelling the same middle-aged propaganda about the Jews. What QAnon is doing is that it is demonizing their political opponents, and this leads to a pretext for individual violence against them. People that follow QAnon think they are justified or obligated to commit individual acts of violence or domestic terrorism because they believe that they are confronting a cabal of evil liberal elites trying to take over the world by hurting innocent children. QAnon followers believe if they push or fight hard enough, then the evil cabal of liberal elites will be killed or driven out of power. When this happens, they believe it will usher in a glorious new age of perfect peace and harmony. This is why QAnon is a real concern, because QAnon followers really want to make sure this glorious new age happens. Even though QAnon is just a retelling of middle-aged Jewish propaganda, it is the propaganda that misinforms and manipulates their followers into action to cause harm to innocent people for no reason at all. This is why propaganda is so great at reducing empathy in individuals from this manipulation of misinformation. Why is propaganda so significant in reducing empathy and starting genocides? To answer this is to start in the brain. For example, in psychopaths' brains, scientists have found out that psychopaths do not really use their prefrontal cortex or the front part of their brain. The prefrontal cortex, or the front part of their brain, comes to life when interacting with people. If a friend is distraught over a breakup like before, then the prefrontal cortex of the person reads their friend's distraught nature by reading their facial features on what emotions are being displaced. Plus, the person uses information exchanges like questions to understand the friend's situation. Once the person understands all of this, then the limbic system, or emotional part of the brain, lights up like empathy to once again console the friend. With a psychopath's brain, they can't use their prefrontal cortex to read people, and they in turn cannot release empathy towards others. They can't put themselves in another person's shoes. They just think another human is an obstacle to be worked around or manipulated in whatever purpose they see fit. With psychopaths accounting for only a small fraction of the population, genocides driven by genocides are driven by ordinary citizens. In science experiments, when people are confronted with people outside their in-group, the prefrontal cortex is less active. Also, when people see stereotypical images of different social groups, again, the prefrontal cortex is less active. The experiments also show that when people are confronted with people outside their in-group, a mental avoidance is detected because the person interacting with an out-group person is thinking that the interaction will be painful. Another example, if a person says something that is misunderstood by an out-group person, then there might be a confrontation. Another example, if a person doesn't know how to speak the out-group's language, or the out-group's person's culture is so different from their culture, then this person won't have anything in common to talk about. Basically, it leaves a negative emotion for the person trying to interact with the out-group instead of a positive emotion when interacting with the in-group, with their in-group. When people constantly avoid the out-group of people, then experiments show these people are viewed as objects instead of people. The prefrontal cortex of the brain is less active when interacting with a cup. Let me say that again. The prefrontal cortex of the brain is less active when interacting with a cup. The brain views the outgroup of people just like a cup. This can, under the right capacity, make an ordinary human's brain look like a psychopath's brain under a brain scan. This in turn shows that they do not have empathy for the outgroup. Now, when it comes to genocide, if all the members are complicit in creating atrocities, then all the members experience the same reduction of their prefrontal cortex for that outgroup, as well as showing no empathy at all. This can be studied and examined like a disease or outbreak in a group contagion that is spread deliberately. The perfect tool for this group mentality to commit genocide on the outgroup is propaganda. This shows that large sections of the population believing in the propaganda are ordinary citizens taking action with a psychopath's brain, so to speak, to do harm against the outgroup. Propaganda throughout time has changed very little. It is the dehumanization that propaganda pushes a narrative by making the enemy less than human or by making them an animal. Propaganda is a weapon that has become an art and a science to make it more dangerous today. The internet is the perfect tool to propel propaganda messages to people who are most likely to act upon them, young men. Any extremist group can reach millions of people with a keystroke. For example, extremism has been growing in plain sight on social media like Facebook, Twitter, and the far distances of the internet. More ordinary people are joining extremist groups, and that is frightening to experts. In the end, propaganda manipulates the brain activity inside humans. A way to combat propaganda was a school experiment in 1968 called the Brown Eyes, Blue Eyes experiment. In the elementary school, the teacher created a day-long propaganda lesson claiming that blue-eyed students were better than brown-eyed students. In the lesson, the blue-eyed students were treated better, given special privileges, moved to the front of the classroom, and couldn't play with the brown-eyed people because the blue-eyed people were superior. With the brown-eyed people, they were denied privileges, treated bad, moved to the back of the classroom, and had collars put on them to show how awful they were. In the experiment, blue-eyed people acted superior to the brown-eyed people by picking on them, telling on them, and one student suggested to the teacher to use violence with a yardstick if the brown-eyed people got out of line. Mind you, these are elementary school children, and before this lesson took place, most of the children in the class were best friends. On the next day, the lesson was flipped, with the brown-eyed students had all the privileges, and the blue-eyed students had to suffer the humiliations that the brown-eyed students had to experience the day before. In this round, the blue-eyed people felt such a loss when they lost their special significance as being the better students. In a way, the blue-eyed students lost their worldview. The kids from this experiment received a lesson in perspective taking. This means that the kids were forced to stand in another person's shoes by having them open new cognitive pathways for them to learn empathy. This lesson empowers children to see through the smoke and mirrors of propaganda and to form their own opinions on the basis of empathy. When people are armed with the knowledge on how propaganda works, then the power and influence of it is reduced. Now, if we teach students at an early age on how to recognize and to turn off propaganda as a prevention tool from 2 years old to graduation, then genocide and dehumanization will be a thing of the past, and Lamada Plus will take its place with empathy towards the 18 social categories of humanity. In continuing with information equality to make Dr. King's dream a reality, then the next big topics to tackle to reduce propaganda are science and ethics. In the future, the two biggest businesses on earth will be science journal firms and ethic firms. Why is this so? For preventative measures to be in place, students will be immersed into these two subjects from 2 years old to graduation to adults working on their jobs. For one, science is the best information humans have to discern what this world is all about. One of the great things about science is that it is an entire exercise in finding out what is true. For example, if Dave has a hypothesis and tests it, then he will get a result. A rival named Janet double checks the result because she believes that Dave is wrong. Janet puts together and performs an even better experiment that Dave could only dream about. When Janet gets her result, she finds out that it matches Dave's result. The results from these two experiments show that they are onto something that hasn't been discovered in nature. Science, through these steps mapped out by Dave and Janet, does it better than anything else humans have come up with in the history of our species. When there is an established scientific emerged truth, then it is true, whether the person likes it or not. To prove that science works is to look at the U.S. It has the biggest economy in the world because of science and technology. For example, science journals are like the news of the world, with a discovery and replication of that discovery, like what Janet and Dave did to make sure it is fact, are being written down in science journals. These journals are peer-reviewed to make sure Janet and Dave's experiments are on the up and up. After this is done, then the science journals point to new ideas that can create new industry and jobs, like during the Industrial Revolution. This is the future for humans to understand how powerful science is This is the future for humans to understand how powerful science is by being immersed in it in school from 2 years old to graduation. As for ethics, it is the police force in governing people's behaviors and conducting activities. Ethics looks over science experiments to see if experiments and people in the experiments are legit and not being taken advantage of. Ethics are in business to see if businesses are not ripping off their customers with snake oil. Ethics are in politics to show that politicians are not taking advantage of voters Ethics are in politics to show that politicians are not taking advantage of voters' trust by stealing their money. Ethics are also in journalism to show that people are reporting facts and not propaganda. Ethics are in every industry in the United States. The question is, how are science journal firms and ethic firms going to be the biggest industries on Earth? Let's begin with objective, personal, and political truths. Objective truth is the scientific method for finding facts. Objective truth is true whether a person believes it or not. Personal truth is truth only to that person. For example, if 2 people own pets and one person claims that dogs make better pets, but another person claims that cats make better pets, so what is labeled fact? This fact is based off personal preference. Personal truths can be dangerous because it is based on the art of persuasion. If a person cannot convince another person of their personal truth, then violence will be dealt to convince each owner that their claim is fact. In reality, this may never happen, but personal truths are how humans get into wars. If countries or leaders of those countries cannot convince either side that their personal truth is fact, then wars will be fought to convince the other that they were right. For example, cultural and religious wars were fought in the past because each side couldn't convince the other that their way of life was better and that they should live their way, like the Crusades, the Civil War, the U.S. versus the Native Americans in the 18th and 19th centuries, World War II, etc. Now with political truths, they are repetitive claims about something until it is believed. As stated before, Serbian politicians bombard television shows with propaganda convincing the Serbian population that Bosnian Muslims were feeding Serbian children to the lions at the zoo. This continuous dehumanization of propaganda led to the genocide in former Yugoslavia. Just to reiterate what was just said so far is that personal and political truths are not facts, and the only one that counts as a fact are objective truths. Objective truth is true whether a person believes it or not, because it has a hypothesis, an experiment, it is transparent, it is replicated, and it is peer-reviewed before it becomes a fact. So what? Well, it is easier to explain how to deal with informative truth by understanding what political, personal, and objective truths are, because the U.S. is bombarded by each one every day. The reason why science journal firms and ethic firms are going to be the biggest businesses is because so many government institutions and capitalistic businesses will rely on them. Again, information is key for the survival of life, capitalism, competition, knowing what to do during extreme weather, or just getting around the town for ordinary, or just getting around the town for the ordinary person. For example, information can help with everyday conversations on facts, on what facts are. For example, information can help with everyday conversations on what facts are applicable to buying toilet paper, to kissing your partner, to buying a car, to making money, getting along with Lamana Plus, to becoming fulfilled and happy and living in the American dream with equality for all. Yes, it is that important. It is the backbone why humans have survived so long. Anyways, the key to these businesses growing so profound is the education students will receive from 2 years old to graduation, in asking someone to prove something in whatever claim another student makes. For example, if a student does not believe another student on their claim on something, then this student will have to prove it with credible sources. These sources will be labeled and used in school in their persuasive essays written from 2 years old to graduation, and then will be used as oral arguments in their everyday lives as adults interacting with one another. When these students grow up, they will be titans of industry to the presidents of the United States, and they will have to prove their claim with objective truths, or with a hypothesis, an experiment, a replication, make it transparent, and be peer-reviewed to be claimed as fact. This means that the whole culture of the United States will finally be able to use objective truths in everyday life, while at the same time the propaganda of political and personal truths will go extinct. Political and personal truths of propaganda will only be used in school as a tool to avoid when learning them. How? Well, as I mentioned before, in Lamana Plus and in individual education, the IEP will be designed to help students understand and turn off propaganda that can lead to personal and political truths taking hold. Students will only rely on objective truths when they get older. In this way, propaganda will be a tool only to be used as a teaching source in what not to do in the real world. This is the end of part 1. Part 2 will be labeled in the other story. This is just a long chapter. It's just taking so long. Ichni Sanchi Go, Kuju, Konnichiwa, Lalun, Wiwi, Hola, Buenos Dias, Adios, we all win together. Good night.